Probably need a mechanism in place to where if their caucus runs long, they can somehow reach out to us for future potential virtual meetings.
Maybe they can just text me because those guys over there have my number. Maybe that's what they do.
Was not sure if they had it. That would be a very easy solution. And then we could have stayed in our caucus longer and wait. We're ready signal to come through.
They need a bat signal.
I think Laura forgot to turn off the recording.
I think they just left the meeting open.
Yeah.
And therefore
that's why we caucused, and that's why we all muted and caucused in the Zoom. Okay, thanks, Kev. I'm texting their team to see if they're ready.
to those watching online. We are waiting for the district to return from a caucus. Thank you for your patience and please stay tuned.
Thanks, Susan.
I can use my announcer voice. Okay.
I love your announcer voice.
So Stephanie, was anyone able to respond to your text about their time?
Nobody has responded yet.
All righty. Yeah, that would be a nice protocol to make sure we have.
Yeah.
Did you send a text to
Not
us?
to you guys, no.
There
There we go. Hey, Laura.
Hi.
I think we have Elizabeth is waiting in the waiting room
I
to
got
get
in.
back in. Do you see her?
I got in, Stephanie.
Oh, okay, perfect. All right, awesome.
We're back, Stephanie, when you're ready.
All right, we're ready.
All right. Stephanie, just as a follow-up, well, actually, I guess we could go in order here. So what page were we on with the sub rates?
The
That's
sub
on
pay,
October
I'll pull it
15.
up.
I think it's like 9 right now.
It's
There
on
you go, right
screen.
there.
Oh, 10.
13, 10 to 14.
Goodness gracious, it jumps.
So Stephanie, on the para educators, the counter would be 40 and 20.
What's the rationale there?
They're running the numbers because we have to make sure that we actually can count, that we have a good reading on how much that might actually impact us.
Well, I would argue that it wouldn't impact you at all because that money is already budgeted for Kelly services because the paraeducators were only taking these jobs if they're an unfilled job number from Kelly. And so if somebody's putting in for a sub and Kelly picks it up, you're paying $80+ for the day. Whereas Kelly doesn't pick it up, you're putting potentially a para in place or a teacher, and they're splitting it up on their planning time now. So that's really saving you money that's already budgeted. So it shouldn't impact your budget at all. It would still be saving you money because this is for Kelly services.
And not only that, if it turns out that a lot of that could also be charged to ISSER. So if because of COVID, you need to put in a para in there to substitute, that's chargeable to ISSER funding.
So that's why we landed with the 50-25.
Is related to a COVID issue.
Well, but even outside of COVID or not COVID, with the para substituting assignments, this language is specifically for unfilled job numbers. And then at that point, you're not paying a Kelly sub, you're paying a para to go in, and the district's still saving money from an already budgeted line item. And it's helping our para educators out. But
with the new MOU and proposed salary changes to the para group, I don't know that it's still cheaper than the Kelly, is it?
Well, Kelly, you're paying them $80+ a day, depending on their education.
But then we moved their base up significantly from 8 something to over $10 an hour or $11 an hour.
For Kelly subs, I mean, I'm not sure what the district has done with Kelly.
No,
go ahead, Jason.
For the paras, we just last week.
Not with Kelly. No, not with Kelly. We have not moved their base yet.
Yeah, but it's kind of it's a separate issue because with Kelly services, you already have budgeted money to cover Kelly subs, and so if a Kelly sub doesn't pick up a job, instead of paying $80 or more for that Kelly sub, you're not paying that. You're paying a para $50. Which is still a $30 plus savings from your budgeted line items for Kelly services.
Right, but Stephanie, that's the math I'm trying to understand. We moved the para in the recent discussion about salaries for paras. We moved them to over $10 an hour, if I recall correctly.
Mm-hmm.
So how are you arriving at $50 a day if they're working a 7.5-hour day or a 7-hour day? Most of them will exceed the $80 per day for the Kelly rate.
But it's two separate pots of money because you have paras that are coming out of either general fund or their title monies or federal dollars, depending on what they're being paid out of. And then you have Kelly subs, which is a separate pot of money. They're not the same. And so they're still getting their hourly rate. But in addition to doing sub duties, which most of them hate doing, they hate subbing, most of them. And to get paid to be in a classroom to deliver instruction, because that's essentially what they're doing as a sub. They're teaching that class for the day. Because you're talking about Kelly services money, not the pot of money that they're being paid out of regularly. The district is still saving money because it's coming out of the Kelly services money, not what the paras are paid out of generally.
So maybe that's a distinction we could make here, is that if they're delivering instruction, they could get paid the higher rate. But if they're just covering a class for supervision because the teacher's remoting in, then they're not.
Okay, so I think we're talking about two different things. So I would agree with you there. So what we're talking about with the 50-25 a day is if they're actually subbing for a teacher and delivering instruction with an unfilled job number, right? And then if they're having to proctor, right, supervise a class because of a teacher is remoting in because either they're quarantined or they've been directed to stay home, I think those are two different things. And so in this MOU, and I think it's in a different spot, Laura, when we talked about proctoring and paras potentially being directed to proctor, I think we can address that there because last year paras were not paid extra to proctor. They were just assigned outside because they were just supervising versus actually teaching in a class. And so that's what that language with the subbing, the 50 and the 25, they're actually teaching that class because either the teacher's sick or the teacher is, just maybe took a personal day and they couldn't get the sub, job filled. And so that's the difference there. And so I would agree with you that paras or whoever is covering that class wouldn't be paid the higher rate because they would just be sitting there supervising. So I would agree with you there that I think they should be paid, but it should be a lower rate than actually delivering instruction. And they would only be proctoring, to cover that remote work, which would really be quarantine situations, which could be covered by ESSER because it's COVID related.
So are you referring to the proctoring languages on the screen, the top of the page D, regarding teachers?
Teachers, but we know paras were also directed to proctor as well and like reassigned, but they weren't paid any extra because there wasn't a job number given to them. And so
if
we knew.
you're-
So I would say kind of what we were doing here with the subbing. I mean, with proctoring, we know paras were directed to proctor as well, but they were not paid the sub pay because there wasn't an unfilled job number and they weren't actually delivering instruction, they were supervising. And so I think with the ESSER funding we have now, we could compensate them, but it should not be to the 50-25 if they're actually delivering instruction. So I think, does that clear that up, Mr. Hyde?
Yeah, it does.
I think we were talking about two different things.
So we would leave them at the existing rate if they're just supervising. And then you're proposing increasing the daily rate if they're teaching.
Yes.
To 50 and 30? Was that, what was it, 50 and 25?
50 and 25.
50 and 25 for half a day. So yes, that would be agreeable with us. So if they're placed to proctor, they would get what's currently in their contract, the $20 for a full day, $10 for half a day, extra, and then if they're actually subbing and teaching and giving instruction, then it's 50 and 25.
I think that works. But we'd have to add language because we don't have language in there for paras who are assigned to proctor.
Yes.
Teachers.
Yeah, we would need to add language to address the proctoring situation for paras.
Top section, put it down here for paras.
I'll work on that rather than hold it up.
Okay. And then do we want, because up above, Laura, where you had pointed out with the teacher proctoring, do we want to have two sections with teachers proctoring and then paras proctoring? Do we want to do that up there? Or do we want it all kind of in the same spot? Because I think we're probably going to want to rearrange some of this anyway, because I think a lot of this is going to end up being deleted and referred to with the handbook.
Correct.
So I guess we can talk about formatting later too. We don't have to necessarily do that now.
Thank you.
Hey, Jason.
Hey,
go ahead.
can I ask an ignorant question?
What's up?
So when we have Kelly substitute in a classroom, they have to meet certain qualifications to become a Kelly sub.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if that really matters. I don't know what the qualifications are to be a para. So
they have to either pass the para pro test or have so many college credits.
Okay, so
yeah.
And that's
so actually probably very similar to what Kelly subs have to go through.
Paras may be assigned to proctor one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey everyone, this is Tedra, and Stephanie is correct in that it is very similar to what paras and Kelly subs have a similar sort of job qualifications, minimum qualifications for the job.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. So just asking and throwing this out there because teachers could have been directed to proctor as long as they had their planning time still in place. For whatever reason, would we be adding that extra compensation for teacher proctors as well as para proctors? Would that be together? Or would that be covered under their hourly rate of pay, like with the substituting?
I have to be honest with you, I don't know that the teacher proctor applies anymore. If we're volunteering to pay them for forfeiting their planning time, I don't know that you're going to see situations of teacher proctoring.
Okay. Well, yeah. Okay. Then that works. So maybe in that proctor section, we just replace teacher with para.
Well, we just moved it down so it's all with para.
Down here
okay.
see it, yes.
I see it. Okay. So if they're being just on E, Laura, if they're doing the proctoring, I think we said 20 and 10. And then if they're actually delivering instruction with like an unfilled job number with Kelly subs, then it would be the 50, 25.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've got 50, 25 up here somewhere. There it is.
Okay. 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 All right.
Clean it up.
Okay. Sounds good.
So we had a
And then
question about the para piece, about the duty assignment. Or the
On C?
about the duty-free
Okay.
lunch. So, Stephanie, from your perspective, can you give me an example of what you're referring to? Because when I read it, I had a different takeaway. So I want to make sure we're comparing apples to apples. So, can you walk me through an example?
So when I had mentioned compensation, if they were completely waiving their duty-free lunch and maybe not getting a lunch that day, then they would be paid their regular hourly rate of pay. Now, if their duty-free lunch is maybe moved to another spot in the day and they're still getting either that 30 minutes for ESPs or at least that 20 minutes for paraeducators, then I think they wouldn't be compensated because they're still getting that duty-free lunch.
We have the same understanding then. So we'll tweak the language in that section. Can we go to that section?
Yeah.
So I think we just need to say, differentiate between the two, that if they forfeit their duty-free lunch, they will be compensated. However, they may also
have like a flexible schedule to where they still get their duty-free lunch, but maybe not in their regular time slot.
yeah, they may be compensated or there you go.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Or, okay.
Go ahead. You're right.
Or will be compensated.
Or will be compensated at their regular hourly rate of pay.
Regularly paid.
Okay.
Is that good, Stephanie?
They forfeit their duty-free lunch. Yeah, for an alternative lunch, or will be compensated. Yeah, we're good with that. And just for payroll clarification, Jason or anybody else on here, they would fill out the like a special activity log for that, just for a clarifying point.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. All right, then we're good with that part. Okay. And with that also, just in addition, since we're adding it here, just for clarification, would the special activity pay also need to be followed for teachers that are doing their planning time and being compensated? Would they also fill out the special activity pay as far as getting that logged?
If they're paid for that, we would have to pay them through a special activity form, yes.
Okay. Okay.
Unless we come up with a new system of handling that, but currently it would be a special activity form.
Okay. Well, let's not reinvent anything. If it seems to be the easiest to pay them special activity, let's keep it as streamlined and easy as possible.
Sounds good.
Okay. We can add that language somewhere else, or even have it all at the end, because it's addressing anything extra. Because that would probably be for proctoring as well, because there wouldn't be an unfilled job number like there is when they get a Kelly sub job for paras. So like if they're proctoring to get that 2010, they would probably have to fill out that special activity log as well, so that they have a log to get paid.
Yeah, they currently fill out, it's basically like a special activity. It's a little different form, but yes, that's correct.
Okay. Okay. All right. So then we're moving on to D with the options for the leave then. Okay. Okay.
We're going to
You good
continue.
with that first part?
No disciplinary action.
Yeah, so no disciplinary action. Sorry, I wasn't where you guys were waiting for me. Yeah, so no disciplinary action will be used for any approved leave of absence related to COVID-19. So that would also include if I guess so would there be a mechanism in place for, let's say I'm working, at a school, but my child has been quarantined or their daycare is closed because of quarantines. Maybe it's not district covered, but maybe I have to take my own leave and maybe I'm out of leave. Would that be, as far as being disciplined,
No.
would that be covered under COVID?
We won't discipline under those events, in that event.
Okay. So do we need to be more specific there then so that people understand?
Add a sentence in there or add another, number.
Or would those scenarios be covered in the handbook so that we don't bog down the MOU?
We can put it in here. Basically, it says that if somebody's exhausted their leave, then it must be quarantined, or has to take unpaid leave. They will not be disciplined.
And mainly like family members that have to be quarantined, like with small children that can't be left at home. That it may not necessarily be district covered, but they won't be disciplined for going into unpaid leave if that ends up being their situation.
Illness.
Yeah.
Family.
Okay.
Same address. We had these discussions.
Yep.
Okay.
Quarantine, multiple quarantines.
I think that it reads that because God, just personally, Jackson's daycare has been shut down over the last year, 5 times. So who knows what daycares are going to be, or even children that are within our school system that, especially our elementary age children that can't get vaccinated yet. If they've been directed, most of them can't. Actually, I would think any elementary school student shouldn't be staying home by themselves. So somebody might have to stay home with them, but it may not be a district covered. But I think that's broad enough to apply to any quarantine status for an immediate family member.
Are you good with this?
What's in the blue?
Yeah.
Yes, we're good with that.
If you just within the same household.
Okay. We're going to add one thing, Stephanie, as soon as I get out of the footer. Okay. Get those questions.
Okay.
Address, last name.
Physical address, ET, physical address. All right.
Okay. Yeah, we're good with that.
For the 3 types of leave, we have option 1 for vaccinated employees. Any employee who's vaccinated and contracts COVID-19 in the performance of their regular duties will get the 10-day leave and then up to 5 additional days. Option number 2 is for unvaccinated employees who have a pre-existing medical condition. If they can provide a physician's note and contract COVID during the performance of their duties, we'll give them 10 days or 5 days. Option 3, because it's really a TBD until we get some direction, here's what we put in there. The district agrees to meet with PEA to evaluate requests for additional paid leave on a case-by-case basis. So that gets to your question about what happens if somebody gets quarantined 3 or 4 times. So right now, the language above would say they get the 10 plus the 5, but if they're quarantined, like you said, multiple times, I don't know if that's a good sign or a bad sign.
That sounded really ominous.
Did you hear that? That was close.
Yeah.
So does that make sense, Stephanie, that we could put together a committee to review requests for additional leave allowances?
I think it makes sense. I just know that it's probably going to happen. So because it happened last year to where there were teachers and staff that school sites that were directed to quarantine and multiple times. And so I think what we have right now is a good framework, and as long as we can review these and have a structure to really review them and make employees aware, as we message this, make employees aware that if they are directed to quarantine multiple times and they can't work from home, that we have that structure in place and employees know that it exists and the protocols and how to, I guess, appeal.
No, sorry.
No.
I think both parties could say you'd have 2 people from HR and 2 people from PEA who would basically serve as that committee. And you could tell people if they want to submit a request for review, they can. But here's why I'm thinking that this is a good option, because if you get quarantined, if we go the route where you're only quarantining if you're symptomatic, chances are you may test positive and you're going to get covered for the 10 days regardless.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But if we have somebody who's quarantined multiple times, at some point, I do think we need to have a conversation with the employee to say, why aren't you getting vaccinated? I mean, I don't want to take that position as an employer.
Stephanie, can I chime in when he's done? I'm sorry.
But
no, Mr. Hyde, continue. I just want to chime in when you were done.
No, go ahead. Go ahead,
Wilfredo.
Yeah, I don't disagree with what Mr. Hyde just said. I mean, I would, because it would be the service unit directors. I think they would be the appropriate parties to kind of sit with the district representatives to go to review it on a case-by-case basis. And I think it should, again, this is Stephanie, it's up to you on this one, but it probably should specifically say service unit directors. And it would be a what's the word? A collaborative sort of review, right? Mm-hmm. So that whoever's sitting on the other side of the table, we can agree that these are the parameters that we're reviewing this case by, right? It's not something unknown to Kevin or myself, or something that Kevin or I are making up and district may not be aware of. It really has to be a conversation on a case-by-case basis. So, because I can see, if you add the word appeal, I can see that it's going to be not a good thing, thing. So
would we need to maybe at a later point get together, and because we're probably not going to deal with this right away, but within the next couple of weeks, almost create a form that needs to be filled out if they're wanting to have quarantines evaluated. And now, and when I say quarantines, I'm talking about district or Mark Wilcox or Department of Health saying that they need to quarantine, not I feel a little under the weather, I need to quarantine. Like somebody official has told them that they need to quarantine.
I think that's very valid, Stephanie. I appreciate that. If we're having someone who's evaluating our personnel, like you said, Mark Wilcox or someone of that nature saying, yes, Tony Kirk needs to quarantine, but he's out of days, then we evaluate those.
Well, I think there's an opportunity here for coaching and education as well, because if you end up getting quarantined 3 or 4 times during the year because you just choose not to wear a mask and you choose not to be vaccinated, I think at some point we do have to take a different stance on that issue. But
and I don't disagree there. Because right now the direction is if they're asymptomatic and possibly have been exposed, if they've been vaccinated, they're okay to continue with regular work. So we're really just talking about with quarantine and asymptomatic unvaccinated people, correct?
Correct. Yes.
Correct.
Stephanie.
Hold on. Let me finish. Let me finish this thought, Raz. And so I think it's also important to have remote work options laid out. So like if they are asymptomatic and have been directed to quarantine, again, by official capacity. So district, Mark Wilcox Center, Department of Health, even their doctor, that we give them remote work options so that maybe they're not losing pay potentially and they can remote work.
I thought I saw that in here.
we've got the sentence, to maintain consistency of instruction, teachers must continue working, but you want something more specific as to what types of remote options?
Hold on. Sorry, I hadn't read down that far. Sorry. Maintain. Yeah. I mean, because if they don't want their sick leave affected, they would need to continue to work. And in this instance, it would be working remotely. I guess my only question would be for our folks that are not classroom teachers, our non-classroom teacher folks, and our support staff. And again, I recognize that some of those positions, it's hard to work remotely. But having maybe, if they can perform the essential functions of their job for that quarantine period, I think we need to allow them that opportunity to remote work if the essential functions of their job can continue through that quarantine, knowing that it's going to be a short-term solution.
For the support staff.
For support staff and even non-classroom and people that are non-classroom instructional staff. And I think that was something that happened that worked really well at some school sites last year with remote work. And then there were some work sites that it didn't work so well. So having a more uniform approach to remote work in the event of a quarantine situation is going to be important for continuity across our entire district.
So this is Tedra. I can only speak to what I heard last year. It was very, very difficult for paras and ESP to remote work. Many principals and administrators found it a bit frustrating because it's only so many papers and so many grades and so many things they can do. And then at the end of the day, there's nothing else for them to do, let's say after day 5. I'm just using that as an example. So it was a bit frustrating for some of our staff. So I would say let's look at that in great detail and maybe be very, very specific if we do agree to that, be very specific about what their duties can be, because I got more calls from Tedra. I don't know what else to do with Stephanie because she's exhausted all of the available options. And it just doesn't feel right to me to have her sit at home and answer calls or sit at home and, do something when Mr. Hyde is over here, working his tail off, answering the phones, dealing with parents, et cetera. So it became a fairness and an equity issue as well. And many principals found themselves kind of like in a quandary. And so I would just say, let's be mindful of that.
And I don't disagree there. I don't disagree with you at all. I just think because now we're not looking at long-term remote work like we were trying to work out last year. We're looking at specifically during quarantine times. And so we know it's a short-term situation, hopefully.
Right. But even on day 8, let's think about not even day 8. Let's think about day 2. So you still have 8 more days to go. What are they doing? I think that's the question. What are they doing after day 3? Yeah. What are they doing?
A lot of the principals struggle to find stuff for them to do after day 3 or 4.
And with the teacher, that's easy, right? Because they're always piping in. They're breaking up. They're doing group instruction or individual instruction, etc. But with a para or with the ESP personnel, that was very, very difficult. It was exceedingly difficult for our administrators.
No, and we recognize that. And so I think coming to something that maybe some middle ground here, but not just completely ruling out that they can't remote work. That's why I was thinking that's a conversation with their supervisor and looking at the actual essential functions of their job and seeing, well, what can get met? And so maybe out of their quarantine, and I'm just throwing some ideas out, right? So maybe out of their quarantine, if they can remote work for half the day, they at least get to work for half the day, to where maybe the other half is on them or with district, picking the rest of that up. Just trying to make that to where maybe they don't get hit for all 10 days. So just throwing some ideas out.
I think if it's doable, great. But I had to feel a lot of issues around that. You know, again, I may not be popular here, but I don't necessarily disagree with what I believe Tedra said. I mean, maybe the one issue, I think, the one thing that could be done, and I ran into a couple of times, is that where the para where the situation presented itself where they could work from home, the principal just simply saying no. They wouldn't even bother looking at it. So I think if we can come up with a sentence or two that simply says, where if possible, the work from home. But I've had, you know, I don't know about Kevin, but certainly I had to feel a lot of those issues, and you know, it just was a thing, and there may not be a perfect remedy for it. So, but I do remember dealing with a couple of them where it was possible, and the principal just simply said no. But you know, those were not overwhelming.
And I know if we try to get into the minutia and try to think of every situation, we're going to have a 100-page document. We'll be here forever. So I think leaving it maybe more broad, saying that remote work options will be discussed jointly with the employee and the supervisor to see if if there are essential functions and specific duties can be performed remotely. And because we do recognize that there are just some job positions that can't, you know, they just can't.
I mean, even a front office assistant or a secretary clerical they're so limited in what they can do.
Yes.
Because even
and we recognize that. Absolutely.
They won't have the materials to enter and code for kids to do registrations and things. So this may be something, Stephanie, just so we have a chance to talk it through. We may caucus on that, but let's get through a few more topics if we can.
Okay. Okay. Well, absolutely, we can come back to this, but maybe just having something broad here that remote work options will be discussed and determines feasibility, so that it's not, you know, our folks saying yes I can and the principal saying or supervisor saying no you can't. That it's a joint conversation. And then we recognize that there are positions that you really just can't remote work.
Stephanie, would you be opposed to adding something in that sense, like we're doing now, based on existing roles and responsibilities?
Yes, we would be okay with that.
Okay. Essentially, you just be entering into the interactive.
Stephanie,
Yes, Raz.
can I say what I was going to ask?
Yes.
Just non-ADA, it's a conversation.
Go ahead.
This is Elizabeth Rasmussen. I was just wanted to ask just to make sure that there were times last year when staff was exposed and they tested negative, but were still told to quarantine due to allergies or asthma or something like that. Would that just be one of those work from home situations? I've been getting questions about that.
No, because chances are we'll be able to work. Again, this is why that's still a TBD. Mm-hmm. So we allow people to stay at work with the alternate diagnosis. I think we talked about this last time.
Okay.
You know, where if they go to their doctor, they get a negative test, and their doctor says, well, you've had chronic allergies, and this is related to your allergies. Again, historically, we've been allowed to return those employees to work so long as they weren't a close contact, you know, to somebody with a confirmed case. But again, the negative PCR test in conjunction with a doctor's note typically allowed those people to return.
Okay, that might be just something perhaps the district staff could address with Mark Wilcox, because that was a case a few times, and just something to say, that's all.
Well, in each state approached it a little differently, as I'm learning.
Yeah. So I think I think I brought that up before we caucused, that maybe, you know, with the doctor's note, and maybe it's below, that with the doctor's note, that if they do have a condition that mirrors symptoms that's already diagnosed and on file, if they haven't been a close contact, that they don't have to quarantine. Because again, we want to try to keep folks working in continuity of services for students and schools as stable as possible.
I don't think that's in here, Stephanie, but I'll look around and see.
Okay. Yeah. And maybe that's just submitted through the ADA, that it's on file. I don't know the mechanisms that we would want to have, but if I have, severe asthma or, seasonal allergies that have been long time diagnosed with my doctor, if I haven't been in close contact, but I'm exhibiting symptoms that I know are seasonal allergies, and my doctor agrees, then I shouldn't have to go through the quarantining process. Because we want to try to keep as many folks in the buildings for continuity of services as possible.
I'll work on something.
Okay. All right. Employees with short-term disability insurance may not pay benefits. Okay, send benefits.
That exists. Yeah.
It's already an existing HR policy, right, for ADA compliance? Sure.
Yes, we just had it in there because it was a new year.
Right.
So do we need to reiterate these again, since these are already really existing in our contract?
At some point, I'd like to go back to the start of the document once we get through it and just start talking about areas we can delete because they're no longer really needed because they're either addressed in the handbook or they're already established policy, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so I think that the CDE, those are already available options under our contracts and benefits that we probably don't need to reiterate them here.
Because even that, sick leave, it's already in their handbook.
Sick leave bank, we'd like to take out, and sick leave donation since it's in
That's already, we already have existing policies for that, so I think those are safe to delete as well here because they're already existing policies that we have in our contracts and benefits.
Okay, training.
So I know that you guys had brought up meetings, trainings, professional development stuff. Stephanie, is there still a request that we provide those both virtually and in person?
So I think that especially for maybe even the first quarter, and maybe we reevaluate where we're at after the first quarter, with the situation drastically changing over the last 3 weeks, we have had a lot of feedback from our office that people are very apprehensive about being in mass gatherings like faculty meetings or potentially trainings, even contact day, right, for Wednesday, that people are being asked to report. Some people are being asked to report in person. So making those mass gatherings to where they have a remote option, at least for the first quarter, and then we can reevaluate, because just like with students, in-person learning is, the best way to deliver instruction. In-person PD and training is the best way to deliver instruction to teachers and other staff as well, and we recognize that. But we also think that limiting in person with giving people options is going to also help us in the long run with exposures and quarantines if we can limit those types of mass gatherings to where people have a remote option for them.
So Stephanie, this section on training seems to specifically address COVID-19 protocols. Do we still need this, or are we, if we're talking about PD, that's different. But this section all seems to be related to COVID protocols. And Tedra, I would defer to you and your team. Do we still want to do a training on day one to remind everybody of our protocols? What's our interest?
I don't think it's a bad idea just to give a refresher on COVID protocols. I don't think it has to be as in-depth as it was last year, because generally we do know what those protocols are and what we should be doing. But I think it's a good idea just to give a refresher, just to let everybody know, hey, here's where we are, here's what we're doing. And I think also that would probably ease some of the concerns that we're hearing from our staff regarding what we're doing. So to me, it's not, I don't think we lose anything by doing it.
Yeah, and that could be the day where we also give them the links to the handbooks too and remind them, here's all their COVID protocol training. But does
Yeah.
B still apply? Do we still need to provide training on video and distance learning? That's no longer applicable.
No, we can get rid of that because we don't have the online delivery of instruction.
What about now the new B? What does that mean? What did that relate to?
Well, I don't think we're offering this. Tedra, you can, if we are, we can talk about it. But we had some virtual planning days that they could like do and be paid for, but I don't think I haven't seen to where you guys are offering that. So can we get rid of that if we're not offering that?
Yes.
Okay.
And then the new B, district professional development will be made available online to assist staff. I think we could say their district professional development will be offered in both face-to-face and virtual environments throughout the first quarter to be reevaluated.
We're okay with that. Okay.
You could just add something on the end that this will be reevaluated each quarter.
Yep.
Honestly,
We're also okay with that as well.
travel time. So do we pay for mileage if they travel someplace they can?
Yes.
If it's outside of their day or if they're leaving, like if they have to report to school and then have to leave in the middle of their due day for a training or to go to another work location, we pay for mileage. But like for example, if somebody had to report to Haines City High School for contact day on Wednesday, and they're going to be there all day, we don't pay for mileage because they're not having to move work sites.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is a non-issue because we don't have eSchool, so we can get rid of F.
How did school calendar and workday come in? That one threw me. That doesn't need to be in there, right? We have an existing bargaining agreement.
Yeah, we changed.
It was because it changed with the 180-day waiver of student days last year, and so we were still looking at what that looked like. And so I don't think that does apply here.
Shorten the year, so it was just a way to get the news out. Yeah.
That's perfect.
It's a different order.
Yeah.
Gotta get that.
And yeah.
I know what that is.
Okay.
But do we want, Superintendent, how long do you want this to go through the first semester?
Stephanie, do you want to go through the first semester and we have to revisit it, or you want to just have it go through the end of the year with a reopener?
I would be happy just to go through the end of the year and really probably through with our through June 30th through the fiscal year. And then we can, now there is a question with 12-month employees. If this were to continue, I would want a reopener if this needed to be extended for our 12-month employees through July.
Sure.
I would like that opener in there that we can extend it through 12-month employees through July if we needed to. But I would like it to be through June 30th of 2022. And then if we do need to come back and reevaluate anything, we have an opener in there that we can do that.
That works. You can say both parties mutually agree that we'll revisit this MOU
At the end of the first semester.
at the end of the first semester.
Should we add, or if situation warrants sooner?
Yeah, or if conditions.
Yeah, I'm okay with
Yeah.
adding that too.
Or I would say if conditions, because that
Yeah,
way.
if conditions change or warrant that we need to readdress, yeah, I'm good with that
Yeah,
type of language.
I was actually about to suggest, what if we put in certain thresholds? Like, what if the saturation rate or the COVID rate gets to be very high rather than tying it to a date? Because then that way, we'll know that we need to come back and really adjust some things. If
I would be that actually makes more sense than an arbitrary first semester date. I think that makes much more sense.
The problem with that is going to
Yeah.
do that.
Exactly.
So what would, yeah, so what,
I would leave
I'm
it at
not opposed to that because I think it does make sense, but what does that look like?
Well, I would leave it at the semester, and here's why. Number one, to establish a threshold is going to be arguably it's subjective, right? You're 22% to one person versus 40% to another versus 18%. It's all subject to the individual and their perception of things. In addition to which, a lot of this is going to be predicated on what our governor does or doesn't do. Leave it at the semester or needed or as conditions warrant. I would leave it as generic as possible to give us as much opportunity to revisit this versus, because a threshold becomes just that, a threshold. What if we hover right below it for the whole year?
I agree with that because it gives you a broader view to be able to address what conditions we think might warrant it, as opposed to something arbitrary that may or may not happen.
I think that gets
Good point, Miriam.
that gets to your point about what the positivity rate or something or infection rate might be that we might use as a trigger. I think it gives us a little bit of time to play with that number.
Yeah. Well, and it might be that parts of this
Okay,
are not affected, but we need to look at something else just because maybe Polk County is a little bit different than other surrounding counties even. So leaving it broad, we're good with that too, just so that we have something in there that, if we do see something that needs to be addressed, we have the ability to come back and review this.
Right. Go back to the top page. Whole section, we can strike deletion.
Going back to the top, Stephanie.
Okay.
I'm actually Stephanie, do you want to leave safety protocols in there? They are addressed in the handbook.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think this was pretty generic, that PPE will be available and that we're still doing that. So I think, we can probably leave that generically in there. And then at the very top, have a link to the handbook that they can see more details and situations.
That's here.
Okay.
But maybe to her point, could you put that after the title, the heading?
Yes.
Safety protocols.
Because really a lot of the detail is going to be in that handbook. And we don't want to bog down this document with stuff that's already written out, right? And that addresses some of this stuff. So I think just the generic statements like we have are okay. And then it directs them to the handbook.
So we refer to EPA and Center for Disease Control. We don't refer to our state agency at all? I thought we did.
At that time, they were directing everything. This is a year ago time, so.
So yeah, if we need to change anything that's being directed, that's just when we wrote this last year, like Laura said, that's what the protocols were.
Just going to add Department of Health in there.
That's perfect.
Okay.
Because then that provides local context. We get a lot of pushback about CDC.
Yeah.
So we were good with two tissue pod.
3 can go away.
Okay.
Stephanie, I'll revisit that with you. I have a call into the chancellor. I'm waiting on. He tried calling me earlier. I'll call him back tonight.
Okay.
Because Tedra and I were talking about that this morning. I don't know where I think the code is generic and broad, but if I'm going to get hammered, if we had to close a school, for example, and extend the school year versus trying to go remote, I need to know what our options are before you and I can talk about it.
Yeah. Well, and one thing that is good with Polk is we tend to build in a lot of seat time into our schedule too. So we have some flexibility there within our seat time. And I know we have storm season coming up too, that, if there's a storm that could all change. Right. But we do have some pretty good flexibility that some other districts don't have with just built-in seat time.
And I'm good with, I don't don't know if anybody else saw anything that we were worried about.
So
We were all.
we were good with 3, right?
Yes.
Yep.
I just don't like the next phrase. I think we need to say face coverings are optional.
Yeah. So face coverings are optional. I would just say face coverings are optional, because if they're optional, if I want to wear it on my chin, who cares at this point, because they're optional. So I think just simply stating that face coverings are optional.
Superintendent?
Yep. Any visitors and collaborative partners must also wear face coverings correctly while on campus. Face covering must follow the student code of conduct regarding slogans. I'm fine with that.
Yeah. So then I would get rid of what any visitors, face coverings are optional for any visitors.
They are.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Just add it in. Face coverings are optional for any visitors. And then, but if you're going to wear one, it has to be following the student code of conduct regarding what they are. Okay. We're good with that.
Stephanie, do you have any opposition to putting that same thing? Face coverings must follow the student. Okay, you can just leave it as a separate. That's fine because it applies to
Yeah.
everybody.
Yeah, I think leaving it as a separate thing, I'm good with that.
And with the next one,
And then,
I don't see any issues there unless you guys do. No.
yeah, I'm okay with that. If
I'm going to take some of this out. So K-12 students who refuse to wear the required face coverings
I think get rid of it.
Be reported to the administrator.
I mean, the MOU is between what staff, working conditions with staff. And then, but maybe K-12 students.
She's still talking, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
We were going to take it out.
Just take out that whole yellow section. Just leave the first sentence. That's it. We're done.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, yep.
That way, nobody gets the impression that teachers are policing this one because they're not.
Yeah.
That's
Exactly. And then it lets teachers know or staff know that if students do want it, they can also have access to PPE if they want it.
So that first section there is in the handbook. So we already addressed it in training later on.
Yeah. I think we can get rid of A because that's already addressed with teachers. Below. Isn't that next section addressed in the protocols as well?
Is, and that's student related, not staff related.
Yeah.
So
let's get rid of it.
That's important. I would leave that in there.
Yep. Employees will follow established procedures for return to work based on the new guys. Yep. Wait, go back up, Laura. If staff are sent home from work based on symptoms. Okay, we're good with the number 2 in yellow. Or did you guys have further discussion with that since it's still highlighted?
No, we're good.
Okay.
It's highlighted from Friday or Thursday.
Oh, okay. All right. So we're good with that, and it outlines their options below. Okay.
Starting at the top is pasted directly from the guideline.
I think we can write, if it's in the handbook, we don't need it here. It's almost like but I will be honest with you, I kind of like this language better than the language we had up top.
Can you hear that, Stephanie?
You like the language we have here better than what's currently in the handbook?
What was just immediately above?
No, what's above it?
Wait, sorry. Go back up.
Yep, just a sec. I have to move your face.
Sorry.
Covering my words.
Okay.
Well, you know what? It's different. You're right. Leave it in there. It's fine.
Yeah, I think I would like to leave both of those in.
Okay, I'll reformat it.
Okay. Would that be a number 3, Laura?
Yes.
Okay.
Zoom, I would be all over that.
I am.
So we're not doing temperature screenings.
All in the handbook, Stephanie.
Symptoms,
Okay.
Because we copied and pasted that on Thursday from the handbook, so I think
Yep.
we're fine here.
form for
Um,
staff.
I would leave the form in there.
Online COVID exposure form staff. Yep.
That's an expectation that we have.
Because we have new staff too. So.
Yeah.
Goodness, it jumps. Sorry, it
Oh.
jumps at that same
Sorry,
spot.
it's okay. And are we gonna format that? You'll format that in a minute.
Yes.
Okay. Returning to schoolwork after having suspected signs of COVID.
Kendra, do you want to leave this in here?
Returning to school.
I would like to, yes. I think it's clear and it provides an easy place for people to go,
Okay.
particularly our teachers and staff that may have some questions about it. So I don't know that that's addressed in the COVID handbook. Is it? I don't.
This second part is copy and pasting from the handbook, but I'm fine leaving it in here because I think it's important.
I would like to leave it in as well.
If it's different from last year,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah.
All right.
That last bold section there
Yes.
at the bottom,
Yes.
just take out student.
Okay.
Just say ask staff.
Yeah. Okay.
I would say staff are required to inform the school right away if the ill person is diagnosed.
Yeah, staff are required. I would say staff are required to inform their supervisor so that it's specific on who they are needing to contact, their principal or supervisor. And then that way it's not just some person that they happen to get a hold of, you know, oh, by the way, Stephanie's
right away.
positive. I forgot to tell you.
The way.
Okay. It is possible that many of the
I would take out, it is possible that others will be.
yeah.
Take out many, take out classmates
Yeah.
and teachers.
That others will be
All-
considered those contacts and need to be quarantined. This will be decided on a case by case. Yep. Okay, I'm good with that. We're good with that. Get rid of student. I know it jumped. Wait, go up a little bit more, Laura, sorry. Yeah, right here in the bold.
Student or staff.
For any staff testing positive for the COVID, liaison will alert the school administration and their regional superintendent. Okay. Returning to, get rid of school, just returning to work. A staff member who,
This is a section that maybe.
this was already reiterated. Wait. Sorry, some of this looks familiar from what we had up above. Staff members.
Note
Yeah, Stephanie, this is
exposure.
returning after a confirmed
Yeah,
case.
it was exposure up there.
Oh, okay, okay, all right,
There's like
thank
3
you.
scenarios in there.
all right. Thank you for clarifying that.
I'll add better, bolder headers there.
Okay. So returning, they're free listen. Okay. In addition, staff will be required to have a doctor's. Okay. So will they need a negative COVID test to come back, or just a doctor's note?
They need a negative COVID test. Oh, wait, no.
So if a staff who tests positive for COVID will be required to have a doctor's release to return to work,
That's it.
So would-
That's-
Does that need to specifically note that they need a negative COVID test or just a doctor's release?
No, because if they tested positive, they won't be released until their quarantine period's up, so they'll be released by their physician. Right.
Okay. Okay.
Deb, can I speak on that just a minute? This is
Yes, go ahead,
Althea.
Althea.
Okay, because I don't know if you all know, I've tested positive for COVID without any signs other than a stuffy nose, okay? I was just told this morning that I will have a virtual call with the health clinic on Monday the 9th. So I won't be going in and won't be getting tested. It'll be a virtual call. Is what they told me that I will be getting. So just letting you all know that is what they're saying for the health clinic. And that was what Mark Wilcox told me to do, was to contact the health clinic and has set up a virtual meeting to be, cleared to come back.
So, but that would count as your physician's release, right?
But he said a negative COVID test.
So that would be part of the physician's release as a negative COVID test.
Right. So, but I wouldn't be going in to be tested again. They're going to be looking at me virtually.
Oh.
That's what I'm saying. It's a virtual phone call.
Right, but they may be evaluating you and then making a referral for testing. So they'll evaluate you like you would through telehealth or telemedicine.
Right.
They'll probably make the referral for testing from there based off the severity of your symptoms. I don't know that to be the case, but that's what it sounds like.
Okay, that's not what they're saying. I'm sorry, but that's not what they're saying. They're saying that I would be cleared to come back just from that phone call.
Oh. Well,
Are they giving you a date, Althea? This is Tedra. Are they giving you a date?
Yes, ma'am. I have a call. They're going to
No. Are they giving you a date to return?
Yes. I am quarantined until August 9th to come back on August 10th. And I will get a virtual call on August 9th to see if I have had any other symptoms besides the stuffy nose.
And then they're clearing you for return.
And then they're clearing me for return. Yes, ma'am. That's what I'm saying. That's what I've been told.
And this is Lisa Robinson, and I'd like to interject. I called Mark Wilcox today also because I have a stuffy nose and I have allergies. They told me even if I had a negative COVID test, I would still have to stay out for 10 days, even if it was allergy related and had a negative test.
Were you exposed to someone who was positive?
Yes, she sat next to me at the meeting. I was exposed.
That's why you're being asked to sit out, because right now we don't have modified quarantine guidelines because you're asymptomatic, right?
I have allergies and haven't been able to get my shots. So I had this has happened multiple times during last school year. I get a stuffy nose, it turns into a sinus infection. I can't go back to work even if I test negative. I still can't go back to work. And when I say this is just, they tell me it's not allergies, it's COVID. Whether or not I test negative, and I've always tested negative, they tell me I have COVID and I have to stay out.
So I can tell you from history, if you're exposed to a COVID positive individual, yes, currently you must quarantine for the full period of time, regardless of a test and regardless of an alternate diagnosis, because their fear and their concern is that you could become symptomatic at any time within the 14 days. Mm-hmm. However, if you were not a close contact to a COVID positive individual, right, and you have symptoms, so take away the fact that you sat next to somebody who had COVID, right? Mm-hmm. If you just simply had symptoms, again, there is an allowance within CDC and other guidance that says you can get an alternate diagnosis. What's different between those two scenarios is, in one, you've been exposed to a known individual, and in the other, there is no known exposure.
Yes, sir. But even when I have been sick and went for, like, I've got a sinus infection, The employee health clinic will tell me it's not allergies. It's not your allergies. You have COVID. You've been exposed somewhere. You're out for 10 days.
All right, well,
But
we will.
Mr. Hyde,
I don't mean to laugh, but that sounds crazy to me, but we'll follow up to find out what their protocol is.
Thank you, sir.
They
Mr.
should
Hyde,
not
it
go
might,
being diagnosing people that have the sniffles as having COVID.
And
it might
I know,
also be,
So-
I don't know. I don't know.
I
people's
just want to
personal preference.
avoid
Go
or
ahead,
possibly
Stephanie.
going
Go
down
ahead.
a rabbit hole because we could
yeah,
talk
and
about
I'm
different
not
scenarios.
trying to take this down a rabbit hole.
No, you brought up a valid, like real time, and Lisa, real time example of what we need to look at with Mark Wilcox and some of these procedures in the background. And so
I just wanted to share
ahead,
that what
Russ.
Mark Wilcox had said today. That's all.
Okay.
They said because I was exposed, I had congestion. I went and got a negative test, and because I was negative and I'm vaccinated, I can go back to work. So I'm not sure if there just needs to be a narrative that's fixed on. I don't know, but yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll
And
follow
see,
up.
I was exposed twice last week in work scenario twice. So that's the reason I went to get tested, and I only had a stuffy nose, the same as thinking I had allergies. Because I do have allergies, and I do have sinus trouble, and it turns out that I tested positive for the COVID.
But you were tested though, correct?
Yes, sir, I did. I did get tested yesterday. I did. Yes, sir. So, so I was just saying, so I need clarity so that if I need to have a negative COVID test before I can come back to work, I need clarity on that position.
No, you do not. So long as your
Okay.
physician releases you. So you've tested positive. If you quarantine for your 10 to 14 days and you are no longer symptomatic, they can release you back to work.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
So just in the background with the handbook, I think having some of these scenarios outlined is going to be important so we can direct people to that. And then if there's a scenario that's not addressed, we can look at that individually with risk management and Mark Wilcox.
Yeah, my recollection of the handbook is there are scenarios in there
Okay.
towards the end, if I recall correctly.
Do you mind checking that?
Okay.
They were like graphics.
So then,
Table of contents in the beginning.
while at home, they should watch for their staff and students. So get rid of students in that bolded part above the blue. So staff who are fully vaccinated to accept their final dose. Vaccine will not be required to quarantine after being exposed.
The 90 days post-COVID, when you test positive.
Okay.
I just heard that.
Yeah, we have it in there.
The handbook does have
Multiple scenarios.
like a decision tree scenarios in there.
Okay. And I know, and Laura, I haven't checked my email since I sent it to you while we were in caucus. But before we sign off on an MOU, we do want to make sure we are reading through the protocols just to make sure we've addressed everything.
Thank you.
So, okay.
When we get it, we will send it. Yes.
Okay.
And that's the only attachment, right?
Yes, I believe that because it's not several attachments like it was last year. It's all in this handbook this year, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Unless you want to attach the back to school guide, I don't think you can see that, but it's the one that's on the website. It's the parent back to school guide.
I don't think that's necessary for a staff MOU.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So at this time, staff members who are told to isolate or quarantine. I think that reiterates what we had talked about in the options in the blue. So I'm okay with leaving that in.
And we highlighted visitors because we were going to go back to that based on what DOE.
Did you guys get further guidance on that?
Which?
Campus visitors.
Campus visitors we're fine on right now. So they can be on campus, they can be mask optional. but we are leaving it up to the discretion of building principals. So again, tutoring, support services, mentors, things like that will be allowed on campus. And then principals are being asked to discourage to the extent possible just to have parents. If they have lunch with their child, they can only have lunch with their child. They cannot bring anybody else to the table or outside, and they'll eat outside is my recollection in the handbook.
Okay.
I don't know if we need the visitor section in here.
Well, I think upon parent request, hold on. So upon parent request, student teacher may be held virtually on a district approved platform.
That's the part. A and B don't seem to speak to the title. So it doesn't really address about meetings.
This would be more, I think, of like staff, required staff meetings, right?
And that's the section below.
Yeah. So this may need to move, and maybe we get rid of the visitor section altogether. And then maybe this section moves to staff meetings.
Oh,
yeah, you can strike that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So compare question.
Scrolling down.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Right, jump. Hang on. Okay.
So we had part B in all bargaining unit employees have the right to attend face-to-face meetings virtually. So I know.
Can we clean that up a little bit to say something more like employees are to participate in meetings. Employees may work with their building administrators if there's extenuating circumstances. Can we say something like that?
Say that. So let's type that out because I need to see it.
We would say are to participate.
Well, what would be defined as would it be an extenuating circumstance for the employee?
Yeah. So if the employee says, I'm concerned, I have a medical condition, I'm concerned about being around others, that kind of thing.
So then is this a collaborative with or is it, because they could say, and this is realistic, right? So well, I could be concerned, but then my building administrator says no.
Say it again, Stephanie.
I was just throwing out a situation just so that we're clear and employees are clear. I may be medically compromised already, but I'm at work, I'm not on a leave or anything like that. And I say, hey, principal, I really need to meet virtually. I need to, really limit my exposure as much as possible. Can the building administrator just say no? Or is this a collaborative effort to come up with a solution? Or can the employee just request to meet remotely? Is that going to be their right under this MOU agreement?
Well, my concern with that is, and I think Wilfredo touched on this last time we talked about this topic too. I think we want to be flexible, but we also want to avoid 99% of people not attending the meetings.
Mm-hmm.
So
no, I agree, and not attending, but
allowing it to be collaborative is probably between them and their building administrators is probably the easiest way to approach it.
Okay.
So
employees,
medical circumstances?
I would say extenuating because
okay.
Let's be honest. Here's why I say extenuating and not just medical. They may have an issue where they've got to pick up their kid early, or they may have an issue. So let them work it out with their building principal. If it becomes a pattern, then the administrator will address it and should address it.
Yeah, I like that phraseology of extenuating circumstances because you're right. The grown-ups in the room should be able to have a conversation and reason should really prevail and say, okay, like for example, I got to pick my kid up. I'm really in a pinch. However, if there's a pattern to it, administration can then lean on that pattern and bring it to the person's attention. Like I said, the service unit directors are the ones that had to enforce this language, and I brought it up as an issue because I've seen it as a thing. So.
And then on the converse, if a principal is being restrictive, in that and just saying no all the time, then we can address it the other way.
I think Yeah, and I think that's,
through the regional.
yeah, I think that's where the concern is that if the principal is just completely just foregoing any conversation or reason, that you're saying no, it becomes a thing then. That, you know.
Okay. Well, then I think I'm okay with that language then.
Because you have language in here later on that talks about the grievance process for other things. So if somebody feels like they're being treated unfairly, they can go through the process and address it with their regional and then ultimately for you guys as well. Right, because there's grievance language in here, if I recall.
Expedited, yes, sir. 3 days, 3 days to hear it. And
I don't know that we need social distancing in here.
social distancing would be in the handbook if it's needed.
It is in the handbook.
So with the final revisions of the handbook, because I haven't seen the final revisions, are there mandatory seating charts addressed in the handbook?
Yes. Yes, for contact tracing purposes, yes.
Okay.
Seating charts on buses and in classrooms, if I recall correctly.
There's no page numbers.
And now, could just to throw this out there, like through the ADA process, if somebody is medically fragile, they could go through the ADA process, and that could be an accommodation as remote meetings, right? Because that's something that they could still perform the essential functions of their job, but you know they're reporting to work, but then that could be an accommodation that could go through the ADA process.
Permanent remote participation, is that what you mean?
Yeah, like extra meetings, like faculty meetings or math gatherings, or, you know, even with parent meetings and whatnot, like it could potentially go through the ADA process and that could be dealt with that way.
I think with my documentation.
The ADA process is something a little bit different than being medically fragile. I don't know. I'll let HR take it from there.
I would tend to agree. Go ahead.
Yeah,
they would have to file the paperwork, and the ADA process is really for those that are disabled per se. And so they would have to have some documentation that they are medically disabled and meet the qualifications of the Americans with Disabilities Act in order for them to get that accommodation.
I was trying to think of a way, because you know if somebody has some medical issues but they're physically on campus now, their admin could see that as a pattern of them not continually not wanting to be a part of meetings, and so I didn't want them to feel disenfranchised by that if they really do need that, and I don't think that that's going to be pervasive. But with circumstances changing over the last couple of weeks, that could be a request that principals are having to, talk through with employees.
So I think it's something that they can talk through with all of our employees, particularly those that have a health issue. The question really is, though, if we use the ADA, does it rise to that level?
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? And so
yeah, and I guess
what I would rather recommend is having the person email their principal and ask if they could meet with them or meet virtually due to some underlying medical conditions, that warrant meeting virtually rather than going actually in person.
Okay. I'm okay with that too. I was just trying to throw out mechanisms that we used last year. And so I do agree that maybe ADA is not the appropriate place to do that.
Stephanie, social distancing and required seating charts are explicitly outlined over 2 pages of the handbook.
Okay, so we can probably get rid of that in here then.
The whole section?
Yeah, I'm okay with striking the whole section then, since it's addressed in the handbook.
They're also addressed in here, so we're good.
Did you hear that, Stephanie?
No, can he repeat that?
Volunteers and visitors are also addressed in the book.
Okay.
Actually, we've done a pretty good job.
More staff meetings.
Okay, so
I think Stephanie is always They're done in kind of a roundabout way. We talk about be considerate of grouping. We'll look at it one more time.
It addresses grouping, but we're checking.
Okay. So, and we know each facility is different. And so some schools have, you know, spaces either in their auditoriums or cafeterias that they are bigger and have the feasibility to spread out. But we also have, you know, work sites where their cafeterias are very small for the ratio of staff they have, and they may not have another place to meet. So do we have ways to where these bigger groups with staff meetings, faculty meetings, I know we addressed it in the PD part, but specifically with staff development and faculty meetings, that they have the option to join virtually to these. And maybe we can reevaluate that at the end of the first quarter, like we are doing with the PD.
Did that load out? It's pretty much laid out. Are you comfortable with the current language that's listed there?
Yes, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with keeping it this way. Sorry if I was unclear. Yeah, I'm okay with this current language. We're okay with this current language.
Stephanie, does that include meetings this week?
I would say yes. Because again, Mr. Hyde, you know, Tedra, our goal was to try to have something signed and agreed to today so that we could work on some joint messaging and present this, you know, tomorrow morning as a majority of our staff is coming back to work. So I think it's our intention that this would also apply to pre-planning week as well.
Well, it's effective immediately when it's signed. So if we get it signed today, it will be.
Okay. So that was our intention, is that so people know as they're coming back tomorrow what the expectations are.
I probably need an hour maybe to clean it up, 45 minutes to an hour to clean it up after we meet.
Okay. And I can just as we're going through this, I can come to Bartow. I do have a negative COVID test now, and I will be masked up, so I can sign this today if we come to an agreement.
And principals will need a rapid blast out on this so that they can deal with it starting tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we're looking at A.
Yes.
So we're good with A.
With the storm, we're losing some of our folks that'll have to get back on, but we'll update that. It's handling potential symptoms or cases. We refer to the handbook, but we also have this language.
Okay. Do we need A, or do we want to keep that in for clarification purposes?
Just talking about.
She's questioning whether A should stay.
Do we need A, or do we want to just keep that in there for clarification?
I don't think we need it. I mean, again, everything's in the handbook is really, it's 50 pages and I think we're good.
I personally don't think we need A.
I don't either.
Because it is being addressed in several different spots now. I really don't think we need B either, because we've already said at the end that we would come back.
Well, we already had the handbook linked in here previously, so that's where it's going to be lived. So
yeah. So I think B can go as well. So now with the isolation areas and protocols with the isolation areas, I don't necessarily think we need a full-time LPN. And that's stated as long as somebody is in charge of running this.
Yeah, we have a second person. So the isolation room is no longer in the clinic, and there is a second licensed person in there.
Okay.
A dedicated staff member?
Well, I don't think we need it.
Just take it all out?
I don't think we need any of this.
I think that we're addressing this in the handbook.
Right.
And anything in the handbook that is addressing wages, hours, and working conditions, if that were to change, would have to be bargained anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we can probably get rid of this.
Go on.
Okay.
You can strike that said procedure, because that we struck that whole section if I recall correctly.
There's
Yeah.
no more section, so that goes.
Yeah. Well, and that again, that's already really addressed at the end with the duration. I would like to leave in, we would like to leave in 12 with the expedited grievance procedure with safety protocols.
Just adding a header, yes, it's not
Okay,
going.
perfect. Okay. Perfect. Instructional, and so we were going to flesh out B, right? The instructional delivery requirements.
We're reading.
Okay. Because I think we deleted some of this now. I'm not sure what we were trying to say here in the original. Because we really, because it was addressing eSchool and blended learning, which aren't really happening this year. Well, eSchool is definitely not happening. So I think
we're okay if B goes if you are.
What's below that in the next page?
Blended learning model and.
That's all blended. So did we want, so I know we needed to address, so yeah, I think all the blended learning stuff can go. And that, I think that's why we highlighted it, right? It's we think it could have all went.
Probably the best example of a reopener that we may need to address in the near future, depending on what numbers we see.
Okay. So I think, did we want to look at, well, we have the remote work option already in place for quarantines. So is that really, that's the deal? That they would, if staff are quarantined, but I guess we wanted, originally you wanted to talk about addressing how students could access curriculum.
That's what I'm saying. I think this part can come out because this was specific to students.
Okay.
Until we get that language defined, I don't think it needs to be in here right now.
Okay. Okay, we're okay with that, and then we can do an addendum if we need to and revisit that.
We will leave in there as a traditional classroom teacher.
Mm-hmm. I was just going to copy that for the Paris. I was just going to copy that for the Paris. That's all that's there. I'm just copying some of that for the para reference.
Okay.
Later.
In
the handbook.
Does that need to be in the MOU?
I don't think this needs. Wait, are you talking about the visiting employees?
Yeah. Yes.
I think we had that in there for itinerants that traveled. That I think that's where we were going with that on Thursday last week, was for itinerants that are that travel to different work sites because of whether they're assigned to multiple work sites, or like your Altheas that visit almost all work sites. So that they are completing the contact tracing form, like where they would check in with Raptor. So that if they were exposed because of where they were at in that school, that they could get notified. I don't know if we can put that somewhere else though, instead of it just kind of floating in this weird space.
I'll check it out.
Okay. But I think that's where our head was when we were talking about this on Thursday, was just making sure that itinerants and people, even district staff, right? So as they're moving school to school with even regionals, right? Because, you know, everybody needs to we need to know where they've been at, so that if they've potentially been exposed, we can trace them.
I don't think we need to distance learning equipment before.
We're going to strike distance, Stephanie?
Yes, because we don't have the e-learning mechanism, and so they don't need these types of supports anymore.
Because every staff member who works remotely from home will be face by face.
Oops, sorry. I love this paragraph. Paragraph.
Oh. Parents, please
Saving clause.
understand.
Not fault.
We used to send it home to parents, please understand, we cannot control the internet or your Comcast provider.
Pretend we didn't see it.
Do we still need the length of workday one?
So yeah, go down and let's read that through.
I know that Tedra had a comment about that, so I wasn't sure.
I think what we were talking about is because everybody will be back on campus where we won't have, you know, e-school teachers not on campus. We ran into issues with staff going right up to the 360 or even over because of kids eating like breakfast in the rooms to start. And so I think that we may not run into some of the student contact minute issues that we ran into with all staff being back on campus this year.
We'll address it if it becomes a problem, I guess.
So I think that we could, because I mean, really the 360 minutes is already addressed in the handbook, or sorry, in our contracts already.
It's just stating the contracts. No
Yeah.
change to the hours.
Yeah. So I think we can get rid of that.
Breakfast is regular breakfast. That won't fit. No. What?
Yeah. I think we can get rid of all of this.
We need to say break times.
No, get rid of it. It's in the CBAs. Get rid of that. It's in the CBA. And then this is where we started.
I think we dropped.
I think we're back.
We shed 50 pounds.
We're back. We're back. All right. I'll work on it.
Excellent. Good work, everybody.
And send it to you, Stephanie.
All right, awesome. And so Mr. Hyde or Tedra, while Laura's cleaning this up, could one of you or one of your staff send us the handbook? So while Laura's cleaning, is it already sent?
It's going to come from Mr. Hill.
Mr. Hill's going to send you all 3 documents.
So look from Mr. Hill. Yes.
Awesome. Okay, so we can review those while you're cleaning that up. And then I can get in the car and drive over to Bartow once we have a cleaned up copy. And we can get this signed today so that we can message this out to principals and staff for tomorrow. Does that work?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. All right. So we'll be on the lookout for that document from Mr. Hill for the handbook, and so we'll review that. And then Laura, just give us a send over when you get that cleaned up, and we'll read through it.
All right.
Awesome.
Got it, everybody.
All right. Good job, guys.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks. All right. We'll be looking out for all that other stuff, and then I'll see you guys hopefully shortly.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
If everybody would please hang up to stop the recording.
All right. And then that concludes today's bargaining session. And then be on the lookout for some joint messaging regarding this MOU once it is signed and finalized. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.